Welcome to the bite-size autism session on managing load, spoons and beans, delivered by the Targeted Education Support Service. As with all our training, we try and advocate self-care. If you're triggered by anything within this bite-size session, please take a break, look after yourself, and if necessary, look for assistance and help. We've talked in a previous bite-size session about autistic fatigue. So just to recap, autistic burnout is a syndrome conceptualised as resulting from chronic life stress and a mismatch of expectations and abilities without having those adequate support systems. Autistic burnout is characterised by a long-term, typically more than 3 months, exhaustion, including loss of function and reduced tolerance to stimuli. The first part of autistic burnout is what we call autistic fatigue, where the stress levels build to a point where things like our special interests aren't appealing and we're susceptible to increased stress and sensory stimuli. So we've mentioned previously on other bite-sized sessions that one of the things that can help is energy accounting. It's using a system where we can gauge how much energy we have and how much focus, attention, energy a task is going to take us. It then means that things can be planned. Take into account how much energy or ability to do things means that if you realise there isn't enough energy left, you can gauge what is essential. You can set a limit on how much energy there will be in a day or a week. It then gives you a practical, concrete method of estimating how much certain activities will be draining, but also managing by spacing out those draining activities and adding in space for rest and relaxation. It can be used daily, or it can be a long-term plan where we're using a concrete system to estimate energy levels for maybe 2 or 3 days or even a week. So spoon theory is quite commonly discussed within autistic circles, but it was actually a metaphor used to describe limited energy levels for individuals with long-term illness. It's been used by many neurodiverse groups as it explains to everyone that you would start the day with a fixed number of spoons. The spoons would represent mental and physical energy available for that day. As the individual navigated through various tasks, social interactions, they would use the spoons up. If their supply or limit of spoons was used up, that increased the level of exhaustion, leading to fatigue. Spoon theory was actually coined by an individual who was trying to explain to the friends how long-term illness such as lupus actually meant that she could only use certain parts of the day to socialise, to do work, and how draining that would be. As she was trying to explain to her friends, they were actually sat in a cafe or a restaurant. So to hand, she grabbed a number of spoons and tried to explain that this was a concrete way of thinking, that each activity, each interaction, that would take a spoon. And even simple things like getting up, having a shower, getting dressed, eating lunch would take a certain number of spoons. At the end of the discussion, this person noted that she'd used up all the spoons just by having a meal with her friends, interacting, socialising, and there were still activities to do that day. And it highlighted to her friends the fact that even something that we would take for granted, like meeting up with friends, socialising, having a meal together, can drain or add to our stress levels. So it isn't just about spoons. So many individuals use concrete objects to try and describe, to try and have with them as a concrete reminder. So for example, one of the common objects is beans. Sometimes it's pebbles. Sometimes it can be a physical jar with pebbles. But the concept is that if we have a physical object, we can actually not only visualise the energy levels, what we have to give for each task, we can actually then remove from the pile that we have to show energy levels depleting. So some individuals will have a handful of beans in the pocket. They will take a bean out when they know that they've used up that energy level, when they've completed that task, and place it in another pocket, knowing that if that pocket then becomes depleted of beans, their energy is gone. And we have to remind ourselves that sometimes if you've got those concrete objects, those spoons, pebbles, beans, whatever it is, you only have a limited amount for each day. And each day isn't set with the same amount. Some days you may have more spoons, pebbles or beans. Other days, because you've not had opportunities to rest, relax, or there's more demands coming up, then the amount of energy you've got will be much lower. So it's not a fixed amount each day, but it allows us to have a concrete visual, a reminder, and also builds in the opportunity to plan. Because having that system isn't just about being aware of how much energy we've used, how much energy has gone. It's also about planning out that day or that week's allocation. How many pebbles, beans or spoons that you have coming up in that week. And some days will be more draining than others. Sometimes it's really hard to actually say how many beans you're starting the day with. That involves a check-in. But sometimes it's possible to plan the week ahead. So for example, if there's lots of demands, lots of socialising on a Wednesday, you'll know you're always starting Thursday off with fewer beans, pebbles or spoons than usual. Because quite often, just having one night's sleep wouldn't be enough to fully recover from a particular challenging day. That means that you know on certain days of the week, if you're starting with a smaller number of beans, pebbles or spoons, it's possible to then plan out activities and think, I need less demands on that day. I need more time to recover, to rest, to relax. But also having a visual system like this means that you can communicate to somebody else. So not having to explain about what it is that's taxing, that's draining, that's stressful, but having that visual where you can say, this is how much energy I've got left. This is how much I've been depleted today. Or a warning that I haven't got enough energy to deal with what's coming next. So it might be that the concept is then adapted to visuals. So whilst the spoons, the beans, the pebbles deal with concretes, actual objects, it can be that we're using visuals. So one of the analogies is the idea of having a battery. And the visual of the battery is a good way of communicating with others, energy levels, about communicating not only what we've got available, but how much has been drained for that day. And it can be that some days are more draining than others. It still is a useful gauge for yourself, but it's that communication with others. And sometimes we have to experience different environments, different activities to realise how much draining they are. But having that as a communication system means that we're communicating not just about energy levels, but about our emotional regulation, our sensory regulation. In fact, the energy accounting system needs to take into the fact it's not just about stress, anxiety, energy, but also about the emotional and sensory impact. And sometimes we can't say whether that drain is in one particular area or all three. But having the visual means we don't have to explain. We don't have to understand which element of this is draining. We got the visual to say, this is how much energy I've used. This is how much energy I have left. So that links into the idea of recharging our batteries. Sometimes it is about trying to avoid or limit time with tasks and environments that are particularly draining. It's not that we avoid everything, but it's understanding how much energy it will take to engage with those tasks, environments. And when we talk about recharging, it's not necessarily about putting more energy back. It's not about topping up the battery. Because sometimes the rest and relaxation just means that we're making sure that we don't lose any more energy. We're staying at that level. And that's important because, as we've said, our energy levels today will have an impact on us tomorrow. Sometimes it will be very ambitious to think that we could find a way of recharging, topping up our energy so we could cope with more and more during that day. That we could add more spoons, pebbles or beans. And that's not always possible. Sensory overload, demands and the need to mask will eventually drain. But being aware of energy levels, maybe even conserving some energy, can help us to plan out the next few days, or maybe even balance energy needs and energy levels over the coming week. So we know that we've reduced our spoons, pebbles, beans, our battery levels. It also means then we start prioritising about what we're going to use the next bit of energy on, prioritising about what's going to happen next. So that will have a direct impact on future demands, the environments we need to go into, but also it's thinking again, and we mention this quite a bit, is being in situations where a young person or adult has to mask. Sometimes being in the situation where they have to mask, they have to perform to certain expectations, either from other people or society, makes it very difficult to reach the end of the day. We also have to question, for young people who mask at school, is it fair that they're using up all the spoons, pebbles or beans at school and then they have nothing left for when they go home? They're completely burnt out. And then families then have to deal with a child that has no energy levels, that isn't able to cope because they've used up all that energy. So maybe it's thinking about that, conserving energy, rest and relaxation at school. Do they have periods in the day when they don't have to mask, when they are able to stim, when they're able to play as an autistic child, not to mask and play as a neurotypical child because that's the expectation? Can they have access to special interest? Can they have times in the day when they could limit social times with peers if they need to, just to conserve energy? If this isn't an option, they will use all their spoons, beans or pebbles at school, and then they'll have nothing left when they go home. We have to consider that if we're putting high demands on pupils in schools, asking them to play like neurotypical children, communicate like a neurotypical child, don't stim, don't talk about your special interests, put up with overstimulating environments and uniforms, then they may very well be using all their energy, depleting their batteries during the school day. If this happens continually, then school does become a place to avoid, because they know it will drain them very quickly. And that will have a cumulative effect where that drain goes every day, till eventually it becomes the place where they can't manage or can't cope because they know they don't have those energy levels. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope you will access some of more of the bite-sized sessions from Tess.